I'm a super average middle-aged woman. I am a bookworm who works in the local library, watches Jeopardy, and goes to church once in a while. There is nothing really special about me, and no reason to look twice at me. Despite all of this, a week ago, I was chosen by something supernatural. I was sitting in a coffee shop drinking my latte and daydreaming when I felt someone standing right behind me. I glanced up, fully expecting to see that the line had backed up so far that someone was standing uncomfortably close to me and was greeted by the brightest blue eyes I'd ever seen, staring right at me. I wriggled uncomfortably and scooted my chair in closer to the table before asking, "May I help you?" The person standing there nodded and then sat down at the table across from me. The person was dressed all in white and had the pale blonde hair, which was almost white. The only color I could see was the blue eyes staring out of a pale face. I don't think I took a breath until she spoke. "Why, yes. You may help me. You are, I think, the perfect candidate." She nodded again, appraising me. "Yes. You'll do nicely." "I'm sorry," I blustered. "Do nicely for what?" I actually didn't want to know or to even keep sitting at this table, but something about the ferocity of those eyes held me in my place. "You will fetch things for my employer. You will be punished for failure." She opened her coat and pulled out a folded paper, then flattened it on the table between us. "This is the contract. Each day, you will be given an item to collect. You will fetch it, bring it to the bench outside your workplace, and leave it there by sundown." She pushed the contract toward me. "If you agree to these terms, place your thumb on the contract. If you do not, you will not see tomorrow's sunrise." Well, obviously I agreed. I definitely wanted to see the sunrise. A lot of sunrises, actually, so I decided that it was worth the risk. I put my thumb in the spot she indicated, and her smile stretched too far across her face, making her look more like a shark than a person. It was then that I had a second thought. Maybe I had chosen wrong. I was startled when I blinked and she disappeared. 1 second she was there, and the next she was gone. My stomach began to churn as I looked around, hoping to see her at another table or something, well, reasonable. A person offering a contract and then disappearing wasn't a reasonable thing to happen, and my feeling that I shouldn't have signed grew. I was kind of numb as I paid my bill and then walked home, wondering what I had gotten myself into. The first few days were easy. I had to fetch firewood, a sharp knife, lamp oil, a lighter, mundane things which were easy to find. Then the requests began to get more difficult. On the 5th day, I had to find 12 smooth round stones. They also had to be similar in size, which made it even more difficult. I drove an hour to the lake and spent the better part of the day walking on the shoreline looking for the stones. By the time I was done, I had exactly 12 smooth stones of various, though similar size to my eye. I made the trip back just in time to be at the bench before sunset. I lined the stones up on the bench, counting as I did to make sure I hadn't messed up, but I had. When I laid them out in a row, I realized that the size difference between the smallest and the largest was much greater than I thought. There was no fixing it, so I rearranged the stones in the hopes that whomever collected the items didn't realize how different they really were. Suddenly, I felt the person who had given me the contract behind me, and before I really had even registered who it was or what was happening, her hand was around my throat and her lips were at my ear. "Your contract said to fetch 12 smooth stones of similar size. Did you think we wouldn't notice?" Her voice turned into a menacing hiss. "Did you think your little trick of rearranging the stones would work? You failed to fulfill the assignment correctly. Your punishment begins now." She snapped her fingers, and I felt a searing pain in my arm. When I looked down, an X had been burned into my skin. I burst into tears and ran to the bushes where I vomited, terror rising with the bile as I realized how serious these people were. On the heels of that, I realized that these weren't people I was dealing with at all. The next day, I was to deliver myrrh. I immediately panicked because I just knew that there was not going to be a place to purchase that spice in my little town. In fact, I didn't even know where to even begin looking. The only time I've ever even heard that word was in that one Christmas song. So I pulled out my phone and searched where can I buy myrrh. The only viable result was a cult store in the big city several hours' drive away. So I hopped in my car and made my way to the store. I did a lot of speeding and praying that there were no cops along the way, knowing that I would be cutting it close with the round trip. When I got to the store, I barely maintained my composure as I waited for the goth kid in the shop's shirt to finish helping a giggling teen witch. I was just about to interrupt when she giggled one last time, threw the cashier a kiss, and left. My arm began to throb when he told me that they didn't sell myrrh. The mark of failure on my arm, reminding me that I had better not fail again. Just as I was about to cry, the kid held up one finger and rushed to the back of the shop where he picked up a dark bottle and handed it to me, telling me that it was myrrh oil and was the best he could do. So I bought it hoping it would be good enough. It was not. When I rushed to the bench and placed the bottle of oil on the wood, it immediately exploded, sending glass and oil all over. It was a small enough bottle that I wasn't in much danger standing so close, but I did feel a piece of that dark glass puncture the flesh of my cheek. As I wiped it away, I heard her voice at my ear again. "You failed a second time, woman, and now you are covered in the sacrificial oil. Receive your punishment." As she spoke, I felt the burning pain of another X appearing on my arm. A third failure will not be tolerated. I rushed home to tend my new ex and then cried myself to sleep. I didn't know what she might have in store for me in the morning, but I knew I had to come through. My life literally depended on it. This morning, I woke to find a note on my bedside table. "Bring a human sacrifice." I have been sitting here at my table thinking about this for hours. I wrote all of this out as a kind of confession, thinking I would leave it on the table so when the authorities catch me, as they inevitably would, they would know why I did what I did. Here's what I realized. The person in white was using me to gather the things for a biblical sacrifice. I finally remembered the story of the God contest and the story of Abraham, where God tells him to sacrifice his son, but sends a ram at the last minute because Abraham was willing to obey, and that was the test. I can't do it, though. I can't grab a person and take her or him to the bench to be a sacrifice. I'm not willing to obey. So I'm going to go. At sunset this evening, I will be sitting on the bench in front of my library. Maybe, like in Abraham's story, God will give me an out.